Research from Duke University shows that optimists work harder, get paid more, and are more likely to succeed in business and sports. And what they found was that these optimists, because they believed in a brighter and better future, they took the actions necessary to create it. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so it goes back to like your beliefs determine your reality. Your thoughts determine who you are and what you become. And the body and the brain are listening to you every single day through your thoughts. You don't have the power of the first thought. The first thought comes in. But you do have the power of the second thought, and speaking words of life and encouragement is key for the journey.
All right, welcome to the Better Human Podcast. Jon Gordon, very excited to have this conversation with you today. How you doing, brother?
Greg, I'm doing great, and there's nothing more important than being a better human, so I love your podcast.
Well, I super appreciate that, and that's where we're going to get you sharing your expertise and some of your stories, and we could really kick off with your latest book called The One Truth, which we were just sort of wrapping before the show around sort of interpersonal skills and the importance of mindset and just how we navigate sort of people in the world today. So love to pick your brain on that, get all your tips, tricks, techniques, and thoughts from the book. And hopefully the audience can pick that up as well. So very excited. So let's kick off. Like, you do a lot of work around positive psychology, positive leadership, people. Where did this sort of begin for you? And then let's swing up to sort of what the book talks about today.
I think it always begins with your own journey, your own struggle. We teach what we need to learn. And for me, I was struggling with negativity. I was struggling with adversity and challenges in my life. I had 2 little kids. I had a wife. I lost my job during the .com crash. And at that point, I was falling apart. I was crumbling, and I was blaming my wife for why our life was so bad and why I wasn't living up to my dreams. And she had enough of my negativity. She said, I love you, but I'm not going to spend my life with someone who makes me so miserable. You need to change. In my early 20s, I opened up a bar in Buckhead, Atlanta. I was able to run for city council, went door to door to 7,000 houses, nearly won the election. They came after me with so much negativity the last week. I was winning in the polls, and then they came after me. I saw the negativity of politics, so that was not fun. But it was a great lesson. Sometimes you have to lose a goal to find your destiny, to find your purpose. I went to law school for a year and a half, dropped out, said this is not for me, went to go work for this .com, thought I was going to make my fortune, and it did not happen. So I lose this job. I'm like, okay, when my wife gave me that ultimatum, what am I born to do? Why am I here? And that's when writing and speaking came to me. But what would I write and speak about? And I want to be more positive. So I started to research positive psychology. We're talking 2002, back in the early. It's the emerging field at this point.
Correct.
People are not talking about positivity. They're not talking about optimism and belief. They're not talking about emotions and emotional intelligence.
Yeah, the soft skills.
Soft skills, right? No one was talking about those things. But I'm now researching these things, and I'm practicing these ideas. I start a weekly positive tip. And I start sending that out to people. I had 5 subscribers, my mother, my brother, my best friend from college. And I'm sending that out, and people are benefiting from it. They start to share it. And I just want to add value. I just want to make a difference. I want to get better myself. And as I was getting better myself and using these ideas and doing these ideas, I started to share them with others, and they started to benefit from them. Like, one of the things I started doing was taking a walk of gratitude every day, because I read you can't be stressed and thankful at the same time. So I coined this practice, the thank you walk. So while I'm walking, I'm just saying what I'm thankful for. And when you're doing that, you're flooding your brain and body with these positive emotions that uplift you, rather than the stress hormones that slowly drain you and over time slowly kill you. And the mind is like a garden. I'm weeding the negative, feeding the positive every day. And my wife starts to notice a difference. Like, I start to change from the inside out, doing that day in and day out. Now, years later, I know what I was doing. I was rewiring my brain from negative to positive. And from the One Truth standpoint, I was moving from separateness, feeling more and more separate and divided and powerless, moving more towards oneness and power and joy and gratitude, feeling more connected. And when you're more connected, you feel stronger, you feel more powerful. When you feel separate, you feel weak and you feel powerless. So that's what I realized now was happening. But I was just doing these ideas and sharing them. And then I wrote The Energy Bus. That really caused me to take off in terms of
Yeah.
Not right away. It took about 5 years for that book to be a bestseller. Was rejected by over 30 publishers. It's crazy to me now that that book has sold over 3 million copies years later. But at the time, it was like, all right, I think I have something that can make a difference. And it took a while for it to get out there because it was ahead of its time. Because it was about positivity. It was about optimism. It was about getting your team on the bus and moving in the right direction. I did what you do. I combined the business world and soft skills together in one product, one message, in these lessons that this character is using at work and home. I think one of my most popular talks now is when I can speak to leaders and I talk about positive leadership at work and home. It's amazing how these leaders now love it, because if you're not a success at home, you'll be a failure in life. It doesn't matter what you accomplish in the business world. And the person you are at home, you want to bring the best of that person to work, and you want to bring the best of that person at work home. Because a lot of times leaders will tell me, I'm great at work, but I get home and I'm drained and I'm tired. What do I do? And a lot of it is again guided by one truth. A lot of it is guided by positive leadership. A lot of it is guided by, when you give more in both places, you'll feel better about yourself and you'll actually have more to give. You think you don't, but you actually do. So there's a whole range of that. But with this energy bus, I combined the two, and initially no one got it. Initially, even publishers, that's why it was rejected. They're like, yeah, you're either business or personal. You're not both.
Right.
And now this is we are now in the place where you and I are doing this work. Now the world has moved in this direction, is now here, which is exciting to see. That's why the energy bus hit number 5 in the Wall Street Journal bestseller last week, 16 years after being out.
Congratulations on that, man. What's so cool about that story? First, just to paraphrase, you were talking about the story early days, and they say behind every great man is a better woman, right? And your wife was like, listen, get your shit together and show up in the way we need you to show up. And, early days of my company, the name was Personal Development Institute. And we ended up changing it to Witz and Associates because it was more of like a corporate name. Because as you were saying earlier, like the world of mindsets and gratitude and positive psychology and optimism was rejected, right? It was seen as the warm, fluffy stuff, the soft skills, as we were saying. And I remember back in the day with sales, corporate sales, like the strong pitch and the convincing of like, no, if you let me work with your people, right, we're going to do all this stuff. You're going to see the lines running more efficiently. You're going to see a return on investment. You're going to see more effective people. And there was a lot of sort of proof at the end of these sessions. And the work that you have to do to put into it. The other thing that I loved about the story is your book, 5 years, man. 5 years before it was a success. And so many people give up. I was having this conversation the other day, which is like, it's Dave Meltzer talks a lot about this, which is the lily pad example, which is how long does a lily pad take to sort of fully get to these giant lily pads? And it's like for 18 years, it only grows like 20%, but it's year 19 and 20 that you get this exponential growth where it now fills in the other 80%. And that's a lot like life. And the final thing I'll say just on that is I love the fact that you push the personal stuff in home. I start all my sessions like that, which is I'm going to talk to you about your kids. I'm going to talk to you about your spouse, because at the end of the day, if we're applying these types of learnings, it's going to be applied in our life. It's not a 9-to-5 exercise. Super cool. So let's jump into the book, the latest book. Is this book number 27?
This is number 28, Greg. Before I go there, I just want to say that, it's interesting because you have to prove it. Your model, my model. We have to prove it a lot of times at first, because a lot of times leaders still don't get it today. So once we go work with a client, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But you got to get in the door first. They got to experience it. Even all these years later, with millions of books I've sold, we still a lot of times have to get one opportunity to work with the client and demonstrate how much it works. And once the leader brings it in, then they're like, whoa, then it spreads to their other departments, other divisions, the entire company. But it's almost like no one believes it at first. And then they experience it and they're like, wow, being a better human does make you a better success in the business world. It's just how it works. There was one company I worked with years ago, Defender Direct, and their whole model, their whole approach was, we want our people to be better people, and better people will produce better results. So the soft skills actually create hard results. So I just have to say that, because we live in a world where people still don't get, they still think it's about the numbers. They still think it's about the fruit of the tree. It's like, no, you've got to invest in the root if you
Correct.
want great fruit. Focus on the fruit, ignore the root, which is your heart, who you are as a person. It's your culture, it's your people. Ignore the root and the tree will die. So this work is so important that you're doing, that I'm doing, and more need to make it a priority in their businesses, in their organizations, in their leadership, which takes us to the one truth. The one truth is like the ultimate culmination of interpersonal and personal, and knowing how that affects everything. For instance, like when you feel one, you feel connected, you feel powerful, you feel purpose, you feel joy, you feel peace, confidence, and courage. A team that is one team is a powerful team. When you feel separate, you feel weak, you feel disconnected, insecure, worried, chronically stressed a lot, and you feel separate. A team that is a weak and divided team is a very powerless team, a team that has no power, that actually doesn't perform well. So you can see how oneness and separateness, once you understand the world in this and through this lens, everything makes so much more sense. Like the word integrity comes from the word integer, which means whole and complete. So a leader with integrity has wholeness, they have completeness, they have oneness. There's no gap in their character. There's no gap in what they say and what they do. So that leader with integrity has a lot of power in their life, and they produce a lot of success in their life, and they wind up being a great leader. Whereas a leader who's a narcissist actually believes they're separate. That's where the weakness comes in. They believe they're separate. So what happens? They don't care about others. They're focused on self. And because you're focused on self, you're only focused on protecting self and also getting praise for self. So you actually become a black hole. You feel powerless. So actually you try to have a sense of power. So that gives rise to the ego. And then this ego power, which is actually weak power because it's connected to self, actually makes you a weak leader because it's not sustaining, and you're not connected to others, and you're not connected to a greater strength, a greater power. So you can see how being a narcissist actually makes you a weak leader. But even at the neurological level, narcissists actually, they cut off other parts of the brain. And there's a separation at the neurological level. There's a manifestation of the separation they actually feel. And when you move from oneness to separateness, you move from positive to negative. And it's why all mental health disorders report feelings of isolation, feeling alone, disconnected, separate. See, mental health is actually about oneness and separateness ultimately. And then we manifest that at the neurological and the brain level.
You know, I was thinking about this, which is we've just received such bad lessons in life. And one of them, back in the day, they would say leadership is a lonely position, right? Yeah. And it's not. It shouldn't be, right? Leadership is part of a community. And there's a great Chinese proverb that talks about if you want to go fast, you go by yourself. If you want to go far, you go with a team. I'm sure you heard it, right?
Great one.
It's an amazing one. You know, this is where like we gotta be able to separate some of the good lessons. But you're 1,000% correct. You know, it's about being together. The worst thing you do to a human being is isolate them. So what's your thought on this? I mean, men have a very sort of, call it, traditional way of handling stress and stuff, and that's to isolate. That's to deal with it by themselves. In fact, the majority of suicide is male, right? If you look at the mental health crisis today along young males, it's insane. I'm not going to ask why do you think this happens, but I mean, what do you think what do you think some of the reasons are that people are so used to, specifically guys, going at things by themselves?
I think you could actually,
a hard message to digest from guys, right?
It really is. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like as men, we get disconnected, we feel separate. And so naturally you move more and more towards separation, because what happens is you have these negative thoughts that come in, and there are the 5 Ds that actually start to sabotage you more and more. And so what happens is you'll have doubt. So it starts with a seed of doubt, and that grows into a forest of uncertainty. Second D is distortion, and negative thoughts are lies that will tell you things about yourself and your future that just aren't true. And so I was working with a 6-year-old young man who was suicidal. I knew his parents. They have very successful business. And I heard that he was in trouble. He was even in the ER 2 nights before. I said, let me talk to him. So now I'm talking to him. I said, do your negative thoughts come from you? He's like, yeah, they're in my head. Here's my next question. If you believe your negative thoughts come from you, who would ever choose to have a negative thought? Would you ever choose a negative thought? He's like, no, I wouldn't. I said, do those thoughts bombard you? He goes, all the time. I said, do they attack and accuse you? He said, yes, so much so I just want to give up. See, once he understood his negative thoughts were not coming from him, and I told him, neuroscientists have yet to find a thought inside of a brain. Also, when you're dreaming, having a nightmare, are you choosing those thoughts? He's like, no. I said, they exist in consciousness and in the software cloud, and the brain is the hardware. It's where the activation happens. So the thoughts will come in, and they'll come in the form of lies that will really affect you and tell you things about yourself and your future that just aren't true. I said, don't believe the lie. So I helped him with that. And then once he stopped beating himself up, once he stopped feeling shame and guilt for the thoughts that were in his head, thinking there was something wrong with him, something was broken, that changed everything. But for most men and most people, those negative thoughts are coming in. And what happens is we then get discouraged. That's the third day. So the doubt and the distortion leads to discouragement. And we don't give up because it's hard. We give up because we get discouraged. And this is in the One Truth that people want to follow up and read more about this. Right. And so then we get discouraged. And then the discouragement causes people to want to give up. And then there's the fourth D, which is distraction. And those negative thoughts are often distractions. And we also find distractions in our lives that really affect us, that keep us from what matters most. And so we start worrying about social media, the opinion of others, and what everyone else is saying. And that makes us feel more and more isolated and alone because we feel separate from others. The problem is not social media. The problem is that we feel separate when we're watching or paying attention to social media. Because someone who understands this could actually look at social media and realize this has no power over me. It only does if I let it. And that leads us to the 50, which is divide or division. And the root for the Greek word of anxious means to separate and divide. And so when we're anxious, we feel separate and we feel divided. And that's what's happened. So now we feel separate. So what's happening? Now we have more and more negative thoughts, because I said, as you move from oneness to separateness, more and more negative thoughts. So now it becomes this cycle and this battle, and more negative thoughts breed more and more negative thoughts. And you feel more and more alone and more isolated. And then you feel like no one loves you. No one cares about you. And that's why it's so important for leaders to surround themselves with a board of advisors, with people they can have honest conversations with a coach. I work with a lot of NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball teams. What has happened is I've been a confidant. I've become one because they've read my books. They reach out to me, and then I become a confidant for these coaches. And I'm someone they can talk to. And just in talking to me, I make them feel less alone. I make them feel more whole, more one, and not as disconnected. And in doing that, they're able to now perform at a higher level and do their job better and be there for others because they have someone they can talk to. That's why therapy, for instance, I'm not a huge fan of you feel broken, you feel like something's alone. Okay, go see someone, get medication right away, and move on that journey. I'm a big fan of initially moving towards connection, finding that person, a therapist, a counselor that you can talk to. What is so great about that person? It's not always what they say. It's actually that you feel loved, and a connection develops with that person, because relational psychology shows we heal in a loving relationship. So I have someone who cares about me, and that's actually the key to healing. It's nothing that anyone might say, although, giving advice here and there, doing some practice is important. That's what I do. That's what I share in the book. But what I can do the most, and what you could do the most, and what any counselor could do the most, is to make people feel heard and seen. They don't feel alone. They don't feel isolated. They feel like someone cares. And that then moves them towards healing. So if you're a leader out there, collaborative leadership is key today. You don't lead alone anymore. That's the old style of leadership. It's coming together as a team. A lot of times you feel like you can't really talk to your team, though, because you're still their boss. That's why you need to find a peer group, YPO, other groups where you can come together and talk to other people who know your challenges, know your issues, or have an advisor and a coach that you work with. And yes, a lot of them are expensive, but they're worth every penny, because what's the cost of destruction? What's the cost of your demise? What's the cost of you not being able to do your job because you can't do it well?
Right. I love the 5 Ds, by the way. I mean, as you were going through it, I'm like, this is what we've just gone through in the last 3 years, right?
Yep.
I mean, and we've ended up divided. And I've been saying to a lot of my clients for literally the last year and a half, where everyone's been screaming at me, being like, oh, this remote is amazing. People are so efficient. Da, 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 da. I'm like, you're out of your freaking minds. Like, you are missing the most important thing, which is the connection, the chaos of bumping into each other in the hallway, by the way, the social connection. You cannot build that through a screen. Now, this doesn't mean that we need to get back to this horrible sort of, driving in traffic 2 hours in the morning. If anyone from Toronto knows the traffic,
Yeah.
there is just insane. It's like LA traffic or Chicago traffic. But, we got to put in an effort to come together because it's about community. I've been talking to a lot of people recently around how corporate butchers these concepts, right? These beautiful concepts, right? Culture and community. Corporate will butcher it, right? Because they'll go and they'll slap a bunch of stuff around it to officialize it and to make it efficient and to measure it and to KPI it and stuff. And I say at the end of the day, you just need to replace the word culture with community. Right? How do you show up in a community? Are you a steward of your community? This is the whole concept of servant leadership as well. One of the things I teach is something called debriefing, which is when people have gone through highly stressful events, how do you debrief them? And the secret to debriefing is giving people enough time and space to talk things through with an individual, right? That's not going to give them advice and direct them and solution them and problem solve them and fix them. It's going to give them an opportunity to just get it out. Because as you were saying, the more we get this stuff out with a confidant, the more we have a tribe around us, the more we can start to share that load, the healthier we are as human beings. This is the whole concept of like talk and cure, right?
And going back to oneness, because what is communication? Communication shares the same etymology as communion, as commune, as community. And so the goal of communication is to build community. I love that you said the word community. I love that. Culture, community, because now you're building community. You're coming together with, you're creating oneness and connection. So the goal of communicating is to connect. It's not just to communicate, it's to actually connect. And the more connected you are as a team, the more committed you'll be. You'll never have commitment without connection. We share the 4 C's in our positive leadership model: communication, connection, commitment, caring. Communication, connection, commitment, caring. And the more you do that, you build relationships. You can't have a great culture without relationship. I'm a huge fan, by the way, of Monday and Friday working from home and being in the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's just for me. If I was running my business in a big corporate headquarters, all my team is remote. Everybody we have works remote in my organization. So we've been doing it for years. So when COVID hit, we were not impacted in any way because we were always working remotely, because I'm always on the road and most of our team doesn't want to come to an office. And I always gave them that option. So for years, for literally the last 11, 12 years, we've all been working remotely, and that works for us. But getting together for events,
but I'm sure you get together a lot.
For not as much as we need, not as much as we need to, but yes. But when we get together, for a lot of times we come together for our trainings and for our events and our live events and so forth. And that's a great rallying time for everyone to do that. We get together on Zooms, but Zoom will never replace that interpersonal connection. And so I always advise organizations, like, when you get together, there's a bond that develops that is like no other. And yes, you can do team building exercises via Zoom. And during COVID, we actually were doing our own team building exercises. Amy Kelly said to us, and she's one of our consultants, our top consultant. She said, why don't we actually eat our own dog food? Why don't we actually do for ourselves what we want the world to do? And she said, it will make us stronger. We came out of COVID so much stronger as a team doing our own exercises as a result of that. And so there is an important aspect of team building that you can do remotely. But yes, you don't want to drive in traffic? Great. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you do it. And then those Monday, Friday, as long as people are empowered, they're not micromanaged, and they will actually do their work, and they're not just hanging out with their friends on Friday and Monday or having long weekends. And that's where trust comes in. That's where the culture, the expectations, the standards come in. When you have set standards, then it's easy to lead to the standards, and your culture says this is the way we do things, and then everyone buys into that. Then it's actually easy to actually implement something like this. I think a lot of leaders, and I've talked to them, they're scared. Oh, if we let people you do that, they won't get their work done. No, they will if you have put certain parameters in place.
And expectations. Most people
Yes.
will rise to the expectation if they understand what the expectation is, right?
Yes.
And, you know, really great leadership requires us to have those conversations in a kind, humane, supportive, connective way. We don't need to be ooey gooey, but you know, we need to address or have these conversations fast and furiously. In fact, I talk to a lot of people about effective communication. The best time to have any conversation is when we're trying to create awareness. Hey, by the way, like, you know, I just want to bring this to the attention or bring it up because I don't want it to be an issue in the future. How do we want to address it now? Right. And back to remote works, right? But we need to add in that connection and that group work. Have you ever heard of Charles Green? He created something called the trust formula.
No, I don't know Charles Green.
No, I think you'll love this. So I think it was maybe the 70s, maybe even the 60s, but he came up with this formula that said we can quantify trust, right? And it says trust is measured in this way. Trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. So credibility is the skill and the knowledge, the ability to do the job or the task or execute on that. Reliability, and then intimacy, do you feel that connection and that care and that sort of interpersonal relationship? We could be perfect in those areas, and what destroys trust is you divide that by self-orientation. The higher the self-orientation number, the lower the trust factor. And you were talking a little bit about that before, right? With the narcissist, which is they are all about themselves and they are, you know, isolating and separating from others. I wanted to ask that, and if we could walk that back for a sec. Yeah. Knowing a narcissistic personality and they are in that psychology of that space, can they walk that back? Can they reframe that? Can they redevelop some of those wires?
Yeah, I believe they can. Again, most often people who are narcissists or even big egos usually have some sense of trauma in their life and wounds that they've experienced in their life. And that's the thing. You can't separate your workplace behavior and who you are from who you are as a person and what you've experienced in the past. This is why interpersonal growth is so important. This is why developing yourself and healing yourself is essential. And the one truth is actually ultimately at the end of the day, it's a book about healing, going from that hole in the soul that you have, HOLE, and becoming whole, WHOLE. And I've been asking experts who are experts in narcissism and narcissists, can they rewire? And yes, the brains always can be rewired. There can be such a connection. The hard part is when the person is so affected, so traumatized, their brain is so disconnected that they don't even see that they actually need help. They don't even think they need help. And if you don't think you need help, then you're not willing to do the work. So often we'll take some other new traumatic event, some other event that might shake them out of what's going on in their lives to look at themselves and seeing that healing needs to take place. And at that point, yes. See, what I write about in the book, and this is revolutionary, the brain is an antenna. Not like an antenna, it is an antenna. And it tunes into two main frequencies, a positive frequency and a negative frequency. When the brain is disconnected at some point because of trauma and experiencing some issue associated with that, then what happens is the brain has trouble working as a positive antenna. And most often it tunes more towards the separateness and the negative. And that's where psychedelics are coming in these days. And people are recognizing that they're actually doing some positive, they're bringing some positive benefits to people with PTSD, people who've come back from the war and so forth and had such traumatic events. So what's really happening? There has to be some rewiring of the brain that's happening, that's fostering some kind of connection at the neurological level that is now helping the antenna to work more properly. When you have a damaged antenna, you get more and more negative thoughts. See, this is why it's revolutionary. No one is connected that I have a brain and my brain health and thoughts with existing consciousness. Then the antenna is tuning into the thoughts. And the more the brain is healthy, it tunes into more positive thoughts. When the brain is unhealthy, it tunes into more negative thoughts, a lower frequency. And I'm asking scientists to study this. Now, am I saying I'm absolutely correct? And I believe that I know I'm right. This is my theory. This is my belief. But when you look at issues and you look at how foods affect the brain, why does eating salmon actually reduce depressive symptoms? Well, because you have a healthier brain and you have more wholeness. Why, after a weekend of drinking and people smoking pot, 3-4 days later, they start to have a lot more negative thoughts? because they're actually doing some damage to the antenna of their brain at the neurological level. And again, think about it. Every neuron, 86 billion neurons, has a transmitter and receiver on the neurons.
Correct.
Think about the brain energy by Chris Palmer, which Chris Palmer is brilliant in terms of he believes that mental health is a lot of the issues are being caused by the high sugar diets and the metabolic processes, which are damaging the what?
That's 1,000% correct.
The mitochondria in our brain. And I said to him when I interviewed him, are those mitochondria electrically charged? I said, yes. I said, well, my theory is that they're antennas. And so when you damage the mitochondria, you start to damage these little antennas. All these antennas are not working properly now. And now you start to tune more into a negative frequency. And so that's why these people have more negative thoughts and experience more negative moods and so forth. And he's like, he goes, that's very possible. He goes, but it's still the mitochondria. I said, okay, great. We'll give the mitochondria credit because that's all its research. But the mitochondria is the foundation and the functional foundation of the energy system of the brain. Once you realize that we're living in energetic reality, it makes more sense too, because how do we make sense of this world? Through sound vibrations, right? The auditory nerve, the optic nerve that are sending signals to the brain that's now making sense of this world and then creating this experience that you're having in this world. But what drives all that? No doubt about it. The essence of who you are and your soul and your mind is driving the processes. So when you have a healthy soul, a healthy mind, that drives a healthy brain. That's why healing needs to take place so often at the soul level, and the soul level will heal the brain. But at the same time, it also works the other way. When our brain is unhealthy, then we start to have actions that actually lead to an unhealthy soul. So it works in two ways when you understand that. And again, I'm not a theologian, but Romans 8:5-6, again, whatever your religion, but it says so true. A mind governed by the flesh leads to death. A mind governed by the spirit leads to life and peace. Well, if spirit is love, love heals. If flesh is fear and worry and concern and doing things that are not good for your body or your overall health, that leads to your death. It sort of makes sense when you understand it in this way.
For sure. I love the way you describe that. You know, it also requires us to be vulnerable to heal, right?
Big time.
Lean into that. And most people want to sort of lean back, right? You know, it's funny as a human being, how we sort of want to lean back in situations, resist. Skiing is a perfect example. So when you ski, one of the things you need to do is lean forward, right? Which is the opposite to what you naturally want to do, because and I was saying this the other day, what happens is you lean back on your skis, the tips come up and you shoot even faster, right? Or motorcycle riding is also a really good example when people whiskey throttle. I don't know if you know anything about riding, but you know, when people panic, right, they want to grip on tighter and they want to pull back. And as they do that, they accelerate on the handles or the accelerator. They rip it. Faster they go, the tighter they hang on. The tighter they hang on, the more they sort of twist that throttle. And next thing you know, they're shooting across the parking lot.
Great. That's why I fall so much skiing. Now you just made sense of why I fall all the time and why I'm not a good skier.
Correct.
See, I'm good at surrendering most often in my life, but where I have trouble surrendering is when I am skiing.
Right. Well, there's a physical thing, right? You're going down the mountain, right? There's a joke when we learned how to ski when I was kids. Where we were, I think we were in, I want to say Austria. And my father used to do this skit very well, where the instructor would be going, "Lean away from the mountain, lean away." You're shooting down. So awesome, John. This is like super insightful. I just downloaded your book, by the way. So as you're talking, I'm like, I got to get this downloaded. I do want a signed copy, though. I'm gonna hit you up for that afterwards as well.
Done.
So, considering the fact that we live in this world today, what would be some other sort of best practices when it comes down to reframing and sort of catching those negative thoughts? And maybe is that it as part of the exercise here is just recognizing that a lot of the effort is you got to catch that negative thought and then we got to reframe it, or we got to sort of speak to it a little differently, or we got to action it differently.
A lot of it is just the understanding and the awareness and just being aware of the oneness and separateness. You start to become more of a Jedi in this world and you start to see how things work and play out. And going back to that narcissist, the answer to the question is yes, I believe we can all heal. And I believe if you're open to the healing, then you can move towards that. You just have to recognize that you feel separate and then move towards wholeness. If we can help the narcissist realize that they feel separate and move that person to feeling like they're part of a community, part of a loving relationship, part of a bigger purpose, a bigger connection. If we can get that person moving in that direction, then they'll find a lot of healing that takes place. It's like when you're driving in traffic. If you see the other person as the cause of your traffic and they see you as the cause of their traffic, now you're both fighting for that one spot on the road that you're trying to get into. But if you understand that you're all the traffic, which is a sign in LA says you are the traffic, right, and we're all just one. As Namaste says, the spirit in me recognizes the spirit in you. And if we can recognize the oneness of each other, then we're not going to fight each other for that traffic spot. We're going to go, hey, you got it. Give a thumbs up, a smile, and a wave. But my favorite tip for the person when you're feeling negative, it comes from Dr. James Gills. He's the only person on the planet to complete 6 double Ironman triathlons. That's a double Ironman, which means you do an Ironman. A day later, you do another one. And the last time he did it, he was 59 years old. And he was asked how he did it. He said, I've learned to talk to myself instead of listen to myself. Mm-hmm. He said, if I listen, I hear all the fear and the negativity, all the doubt, all the reasons why I can't finish this race. But if I talk to myself, I could feed myself with the words and the encouragement that I need to keep on moving forward. And this is where positive leadership comes in. You got to feed yourself every day in order to feed others. And if you don't have it, you can't share it. And so often what we believe determines what we create. People poo-poo positivity. They think it's Pollyanna. They think it's fake. I'm not talking about toxic positivity. And by the way, I hate that term because if it's toxic, it's not positive. I'm talking about resilience. I'm talking about grit. I'm talking about a place of wholeness where you come from power, from purpose, from joy, from courage and confidence. It's a much different mindset than someone who feels separate and they feel cluttered and weak and insecure and unconfident and tons of doubt and tons of insecurity. So what do you want? Who do you want to be? And as you move towards this wholeness, as you move towards this talking to yourself and feeding yourself with words of life and peace and joy, you start to act more confident and feel more confident. And just one other note on this. Research from Duke University shows that optimists work harder, get paid more, and are more likely to succeed in business and sports. And what they found was that these optimists, because they believed in a brighter and better future, they took the actions necessary to create it. It became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. And so it goes back to like your beliefs determine your reality. Your thoughts determine who you are and what you become. And the body and the brain are listening to you every single day through your thoughts. You don't have the power of the first thought. The first thought comes in, but you do have the power of the second thought. And speaking words of life and encouragement is key for the journey.
Amazing. Pro athletes do this. There's a lot of visualization, and not just visualization, but speaking to what they're going to do, right? I had an ex-facilitator. She was an ex-athlete or retired athlete, I should say. And she would tell the story around how, skier moguls would be sitting at the top and going, okay, soft knees, left, right, like focusing on where they're going, not on, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? How do I do it? And, Phelps would do this. Like it's a very common thing that you see in athletics, right? Which is that mindset, that focus. SEALs, Marines, same type of exercise. Also with this, and you co-authored the book, Damon West, The Coffee Bean. I had Damon on the show a little while ago, but he's a perfect example of being in a very difficult situation. And then part of his success was changing the way he thought and he looked at things and he spoke to things, right?
Creating from the inside out instead of the outside in. That we have the power within us to transform the environment and to succeed in the environment that we're in. I met Damon. The reason why I wrote that book, The Coffee Bean, with him is because I was teaching inside out for years. And then once I learned this analogy of how he was using it from Clemson football, Dabo Sweeney is the one who introduced me to Damon. I've worked with Clemson now 12 years. Once I heard that, I'm like, that is the perfect analogy that explains inside out. And as you said, it's a perfect example. Visualization from athletics. I work with all these different pro athletes in college and pro teams, which is what I love. I get to work with pro sports teams, college teams, and then I work with all these different companies. So you see how the same principles apply, as you just said. Visualize. That's what all the great ones do. Well, guess what? We need to do that in sales. We need to do that in business. My son just graduated from Clemson. He's now in sales in his first job. And I'm texting him, believe. expect success, visualize them saying yes. And so we need this in business as well, because if it works for athletes and the greatest athletes in the world, it will also work for you in your business. Wyndham Clark, who just won the US Open, he read The Energy Bus about a month ago. And then he won Wells Fargo after reading it, and then won the US Open. And it was so cool to see, and even talked about it in several interviews, of reading the book and changing his mindset. What changed? Not the circumstance. His mindset changed, and then his mindset changed the circumstance. That's the power of your mind and your belief.
Right. Amazing stories. And again, just a stamp of, like, you know, The Energy Bus still killing it today. How long? It's been, what, you said 12 years?
16 years. I wrote it in 2006, came out in 2007.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm honored. I'm thankful that I get to do this. I'm thankful I wrote that book. It came to me in a walk, a thank you walk. I wrote it in 3.5 weeks. It was one of those lightning strikes where it just comes to you. I wrote it. It was divine inspiration. And then it comes out there, like I said, gets rejected. All those publishers, takes 5 years to be a bestseller. But I was having to live all the principles in the book. And I think it made me appreciate the journey, live the principles, see how powerful they are. I'm actually speaking at the National Speakers Association coming up, sharing my journey with all these speakers who are just beginning. Because for me, that's what it was like. And now the One Truth, I think, is like, for me, it was like, it's the next book. I've written all these other books, and they're great books. Like Training Camp is probably my favorite. The Carpenter, people love The Carpenter, Power of Positive Leadership, all those books. But the One Truth is sort of like my next eureka moment that happened to me in that same way as The Energy Bus. So I feel like I'm just beginning again. Like I'm just getting started once again. Thankfully I have a little bit of a runway now. It's not going to be as hard to get going.
You could get published a little easier. The proof's in the pudding, man. What a story about sort of being so ahead of your time, but then sort of, you know, sticking out and pushing it too. And I say this all the time. Some of the best concepts out there have been around forever. It's just about practicing them. And all this work that we do isn't about learning. You know, I think the failure in a lot of the exercise of personal development is people get caught up. And I was chatting with this guy, Andrew Daniel, about it, which was, you know, people get caught up in the exercise of just doing the course, right? I've done it, right? I listened to the podcast. I read the book. Now what, right? It's the slow practicing, like yoga or breath work, that if you practice it enough, you get really good at it, right? You start to change those neurological connections. And for the audience, back to what we're talking about, one of the things we know about neurological connections and pathways in our brain is they're always developing, right? And all we're really trying to do is introduce a new pathway and run that pathway, right? Run that play over and over and over again. And if you do that enough, neurological pathways turn into neurological highways. Now it becomes a little more natural, more unconscious, more comfortable, right? But that's the moment where we got to start to go back to that consciousness, right? So it's always about going through those stages of the learning curve.
That's really good. We want to go from we want dirt roads to negativity. We want highways to positivity, to possibility, and to adaptation and innovation and creation.
Right. And to the audience, just try it. I mean, if you're sitting there with negative thoughts, catch it and then just do a simple exercise of, like, you know, say the opposite, right? Doesn't mean that all of a sudden it's going to, you know, magically just be like there's one that's waves and you feel differently, but you do that enough. Next thing you know, it starts to become the routine.
Takes about a month to start to feel a little different. And then after a few months, you feel even more different. A year, you're like, okay, wow. The garden of your mind starts to look amazing. Now I've been doing it for about 18 years myself. And the negative guy I was, the guy with anxiety, the guy with depression, I actually had depression, the guy who felt separate, who felt isolated. I was that person who felt all those ways. And I was crumbling and I was fearful and I was stressed. And I lived with this constant pit in my stomach all the time. And now I'm the person who wakes up happy, optimistic, positive. You wouldn't even recognize the old me. I don't even recognize the old me. I feel like such a different, I have to remind myself, remember, John, what you were like, so that I can help people who are now like I was. And so I have to remember that, because I was not that positive guy. But the great news is you can become it. And I love what you said, Greg. You've got to do the work. It doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen by osmosis. Too many people, they read something, but they don't take action. A CEO the other day on the treadmill said to me, John, We use the energy bus for our company. We're going to introduce it 5 years now later again. We've got to get back to it. How many of your clients actually, you think after you speak or read your book, actually implement it? How many actually ingrain it into the culture? And I thought so many organizations today have a mission statement, but only the great ones have people who are on a mission. I said, not many. He's like, I don't think so at all. You're right. He goes, I know these CEOs, it's less than that. Because I said about 10%. He goes, it's less than that. And I realized, wow, okay, I'm not going to live the rest of my life now. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I'm not going to spend the next 20, God willing, just talking, entertaining, inspiring without getting people to take action. I've got to help encourage and drive people to act, because that's the only way that they will change. So now I'm ending every talk that I give with all the audiences with this, like, you've got to act. You've got to take action. What's the one thing you're going to do now to see the results that you want? Pick one. Mine was the thank you walk. Pick one thing you do every day and start doing it. When you master it, then add the next thing. Once you master that, add the next thing. Within a year, you're going to literally master a bunch of things, and you're going to be a new person on your way to incredible growth. So, Greg, I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
I appreciate you, man. And, I'll share this line with you. Action creates the path, right? It's not always about knowing the path. It's about walking it, and the path becomes a little clearer.
Boom. I love that. Action creates the path. That's good. Right. But you know why? A lot of times we always think, we have to be confident to take action. No, you're not always going to be confident. Just take the action and you'll start to make the path known.
For sure. At the end of the episode, we come to the most important question, which is, what do you think we could all do to be better humans tomorrow?
3 words: love, serve, care. This is from my book, The Carpenter. You love others. You love what you do. You serve every day. You serve others, and you show that you care. When you love, serve, and care, you not only make yourself better, you make everyone around you better.
It's amazing. Amazing. For the audience, any upcoming events, and besides the book, One Truth, go and audio book it or go and order your copy today. But where else can people get in touch with you and drop some of the links and what's upcoming for you?
Yeah, jongordon.com, JON Gordon.com. We have a weekly positive tip I send out. You can sign up for that. Also, when you sign up for that, you'll get updates on our events. We got Day of Development coming up, and Day of Development is going to be a great program where we do mindset, leadership, teamwork in a 1-day program. It's going to be epic. And that is actually in the fall. We've got Boston, Charlotte, and Phoenix in the fall. So adayofdevelopment.com, but at jongordon.com, you'll also see, links to it. Also on Twitter, Instagram, at Jon Gordon 11. We're always posting different tips and so forth to help people on their journey. And then you'll find out information about what we have upcoming if you follow me on those channels.
Amazing. We're going to drop all those links in the show notes as well. To the audience, this was a special episode, the legend Jon Gordon. Maybe you need to listen to this episode twice. Go pick up the book, start to practice those things, one thing every single day. Jon, I super, super, super appreciate it. For me personally, this was inspiring and inspiring and very deepening and reinforcing to the work that I do as well. So thank you for being here.
Thanks, Greg. I appreciate the work that you do. And I just loved our conversation about it. Like-minded, doing great work, and now going out, making a greater impact together. So I love it.
Right. The world needs more of us. All right. To the audience, if you like today's episode, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, go and follow Jon Gordon. We've got all the links in the show notes, and stay happy, stay healthy. We will see you next week.